All right. Hi, everybody. My name is David. I'm the community development lead here at MakerDAO. Welcome to the April 16th community call. Today, we're going to be going over all of the stuff that's been going on in the MakerDAO universe over the last week. For context, for those of you in the call today that might be expecting Brian Novello to come on for a second round of Q&A, unfortunately, he had a schedule conflict and he can't make it this week. Although I invite anybody with outstanding questions to send them my way, and I will aggregate them and make them available for when he does come on. So just going to start us off with that. There's a couple of really cool things going on, particularly in Cape Town in South Africa. I don't have anybody on the call who's currently in Cape Town right now. Lenka and Annette are both a bit busy there, but I do have this document that they gave me, so I could give you guys a rundown of some of the events that are going on in Cape Town. So, all right, let me actually present my screen to make it a little bit more interesting for you guys. All right, so this week here, yeah, all right, you guys should be able to see now. So, here in Cape Town, not here because I'm in New York, but in Cape Town, after tomorrow, on April 18th, there's going to be a town decentralized finance inclusion conference thing. I think we are participating in that. I think Mariano Conti is speaking. Yeah, Mariano Conti is speaking about the Dai Credit System being the backbone of an open financial ecosystem. That's going to be really exciting. Mariano happens to be one of my favorite people in Maker. He's a real sweetheart of a guy. We're also going to have Gustan Arentoft, who is one of our BD team at Maker. He does BD in Europe, and he's going to be talking about financial inclusion, frontier tech in Africa. So he's going to be talking about technologies and why they matter for the region, and how decentralization can unlock innovation and make previously inaccessible data available. And so, yeah, a couple of really great talks there. Florian, who's, I just want to highlight Florian here for just a second, because Florian happens to be a really fantastic guy when it comes to community building, and him and his team are working on a thing called Protea, which is very much like a meetup app, but specifically for crypto. But he's great. He's really into tokenized bonding curves and all these kinds of things. So if you guys are a fan of community building and TCRs and all that kind of stuff, definitely check out Protea. So anyway, after the 18th, on the 19th through the 21st, there's going to be the ETH Cape Town Hackathon, and a bunch of hackers are going to be coming together to work on a lot of DeFi-related projects. So yeah, I'm not going to go through the entire thing, but I guess it's not too long. But either way, there's going to be a lot of stuff going on in Cape Town, and hopefully we get to see some really awesome stuff come out of it. So that'll be that. For those of you guys that are just joining the call, I'm going through some of the events that are happening this week, and I'm going to post the agenda document in the chat so you guys can follow along, click any links, and basically have access to whatever I'm talking to you guys about here. And yeah, so besides that, we have on April 10th, that already passed. So basically it's really just the Cape Town stuff going on. And then Du is in Taiwan. Du is our Korean community manager. He's going to be in Taiwan from April 23rd to the 28th, speaking and hosting this thing called DLT 101, which is Distributed Ledger Technology 101, I presume. And so that's always exciting. And so it's a pretty light week for us. That's it for events. I'm going to move forward to some of the more substantive news. We have a couple of new hires. So we have John Y and Fenny. I don't know Fenny's last name, but they are both joining the legal team, and they're going to be both based in New York. So we have a couple of new hires on the legal front, which is really great because our legal team is way overworked and way understaffed. So I'm very happy for them expanding a bit.
Fanny Wang, I think is her last name.
Might be her, yeah.
Yeah, I think I know where it is.
All right, so that's for new hires. I'm gonna go through partnerships now. So we Did see one partnership announcement this week, Pay with Dai on Origin. And Origin is basically like a marketplace protocol, and everything can now be seen actually denominated in Dai there, if you so choose. But yeah, so that's about it for partnerships. We had a bunch of stuff going on the governance front. So we had an executive vote that started on Friday, Friday the 12th, and it actually ended up passing by Sunday the 14th. And the vote passed with 120,273 MKR, which was given by a total of 79 voting addresses. So the stability fee was raised from from what was it? Crap. Give me 1 second. My brain is farting right now.
7.5.
It went from 7.5 to 11.5, right? Yeah. So see, and for some reason in my head, I'm like, wait, where are we already at 11.5? I thought we were going up another 4. But yeah, so it went from 7.5 to 11.5%, and that was passed on Sunday. So the voter turnout is actually up by 42 addresses, which is interesting considering that the amount of Maker that was actually in that proposal seems to be around the same amount. But the voter turnout is up 42 addresses, or 113% since the last executive vote, and it's largely due to Nikolai's roll call initiative. So the total stake in the winning proposal increased by 55,000 MKR. Oh, so then I was wrong. Oh, you know what? Yeah, so this is what happened. When the last executive vote passed, it passed with like I guess 70,000 plus MKR, but this one passed with about 120,000. But I was seeing 170,000 in it a couple of days ago. That's why I got a little confused there. But yeah, so 85% more MKR than the last executive vote. And so with that, and in line with our sort of resolve to do continuous polling, on Monday we put out a new governance poll that anybody can vote on now. I think it's on for 3 days, so it should be closing right before Thursday's governance meeting. And the governance poll is simply a choice of 4 different choices to keep the fee to raise it 1%, 2%, 3%, or 4%. I think. And then I guess it's 5 choices. Jeez, I gotta brush up on my governance. But yeah, so anybody with MKR can feel free to vote there and participate in the ongoing discussions that are happening in our MKR Gov MakerGov. So that is what's going on. There has been a couple of blog posts that came out of Maker this week. So there was a global meetups and microgrants initiative that I actually was part of spearheading, and we put together this do-it-yourself meetup kit where anybody in the world can go. They have all of these resources available to them. It's just a handful of guides and quick tips, and basically gives anybody the tools they need to organize and host a meetup on their own. Doesn't even have to be a Maker meetup. But there's also the MicroGrants initiative that's built into that resource. So anybody who's actually doing a MakerDAO DeFi related meetup can request funding, and we are happy to fund them in Dai and help support any grassroots meetups that are going on in our space. So that's a really fun thing that I'm happy finally got put out in blog form post, even though we've been slowly launching it for like the last couple months. So I'm very happy about that. Another blog post that came out was yet another Road to Multi-Collateral Dai updates. So with the slow rollout, they're doing basically a ton of changes in each iteration, but they're trying to push out things as quickly as possible. If you want to read more on that, so the new Kovan release is V0.2.3, and they have a bunch of changes there. And I don't think any of the contracts actually changed, but I might be wrong. So definitely check that out if you are actively testing multi-collateral Dai on Kovan, because there may be some changes that you are not aware of.
So the links in that post that you're talking about don't work, and they don't link to
in which post? The global
the
meetups
road to multi-collateral Dai. You get a 404 error on almost anything as it goes into the MakerDAO repo, right? So test chain deployment scripts, that's there. What's not there is the updated Kovan MCD addresses, 404. I told Chris about it.
Okay, if Chris knows about it, then that's fine. I'm gonna keep a note of that, and I'm gonna remind them again on the internal channels. Thank you for pointing that out, Chris. I appreciate it. All right, cool. So then, and then lastly, there was the upgrades to the Maker Ecosystem Foundation structure post, which came out early in the week. That talked a bit about what was going on with the board and the foundation's desire to expand the board to include non-technical people and to basically try to make it a more formalized structure. Yeah, all right, cool. So that's it for all the sort of more official stuff. We're gonna dive into the highlights from the community, but before I dive into them, I want to open it up to the chat and just kind of talk to you guys for a second. This is a community call. We welcome anybody here to bring up questions, to discuss. We want to hear from you, and so yeah, if anybody has any questions about the stuff that I just mentioned, let me know. And if not, we're gonna move on to some community highlights, which are always my favorites because MakerDAO is its community. All right, cool. So a couple of things this week. We have for developer creations, we have somebody who created a ticketing app which uses Dai for payments, and they're particularly using it for payments for a conference that they're organizing. So check that out. Also, sorry, before I move on, I know a bunch of newer people will join the call. Here's an agenda for you guys to check out and follow along if you guys are interested in anything I'm talking about. So I'm in the highlights from the community section. And so, yeah. So basically, developer creations, somebody created a ticketing app which uses Dai, and they asked for feedback. So if you guys are interested in giving them feedback, definitely comment on that Reddit thread that I linked. A bunch of really great articles came out this week. So we had Mark come out with yet another MakerDAO revenue analysis. He did one for the entire year of 2018, and this article that came out this week was actually the Q1, the quarter one of 2019 revenue analysis for MakerDAO, which is really cool. He has a really great methodology. Seems to be very intuitive. And basically scrapes the blockchain and then assigns the values for the trades according to the timestamp and the Oracle data, and he comes out with this revenue analysis, which is really cool because MakerDAO as a system is floating around in the Ethereum blockchain, and there's no real I guess mandate or need to do quarterly revenue analyses. So seeing somebody from the community put something out like this is really nice. There was also the article that came out this week called Introducing DPOR, which is Libor for Open Finance. DPOR stands for the Dai Interprotocol. Here, hold on. I'm just going to click on the article and get it right. The Decentralized Interprotocol Offered Rate. And basically, the idea of this is that it could be used as a benchmark for open finance products. And so DPOR. Actually, I guess I could go on LoanScan and give you and show you guys their initial sort of DPOR breakdown here. 1 second. Let me share my screen. There we go. So here's LoanScan, and so Dai DPOR here is the first prototype. It's basically a rolling 24-hour period volume weighted average borrow rate on Compound and MakerDAO. So if I'm understanding that correctly, it's basically just Compound and MakerDAO, and you basically have you have the lend APR here. This is, I think, real time. Yeah, they are real time. So borrow and lending APR. So I believe that DPOR is still super early, and there's a ton of really great people talking about how to improve it and how to make it useful as a metric that tracks the ecosystem basically. And yeah, if you guys are interested in that, there is a thread, both on the MakerDAO sub and the MKR Gov sub. And there's also a call about Deport that Matthew, gosh, what's his name? Matteo Rabinowitz, I think is his name. Yeah.
No, it's actually Matteo Leibowitz.
Leibowitz, yeah, Leibowitz, right. I always, it's funny because I actually always mix him up with you, Matthew, because you guys have such similar sounding names. You're Matthew Rabinowitz while he's Matteo Leibowitz. So I always get a little bit confused there. But yeah, he's putting together a call. Well, he's already put together a call to discuss DIPOR, and I think that there's going to be more calls in the future. So that's really exciting if you want to read about that. Another article that came out, here, let me stop presenting. Another article that came out was the MakerDAO to increase fees above 10% in bid to stabilize Dai. That was a CoinDesk article authored by, I believe, Christine Kim. Really, really well done article. Check that out. There's another one, tensions flare in MakerDAO community call over transparency issues. That was also Christine Kim's article about what happened in our community call last week, where Brian Novello had come on to do some Q&A, and basically there was a bit of tension and frustration over the way some of the questions were answered, and just about in general how the call went. So check that out. It's news. Another thing that happened, our very own David Hoffman, who's a great member of our community, super active, talks to everybody, has this podcast. I think it's I can't remember the name of his pod. I should know it. Gosh. All right. Well, he wrote an article called "Dai is not a dollar," and it's a new perspective for Dai's role in Ethereum. And he makes this sort of novel argument that even though Dai isn't a dollar, it's still sort of stable enough. And just read his article. You'll get a better sense of it than I did, because I kind of skimmed through it for the sake of my own time, because my plate is so dang full. But a lot of great articles coming out these days. All right. Next article I want to mention is it's called "Introducing the Next Level of Tokenization of Private Placement Securities," and it was put up by the tokenizer.io, and it's about Fluidity, Factora, and the real estate deals that they're doing in Brooklyn, where basically you could actually do everything in Dai, which is really freaking cool. But yeah, all right. So besides the articles, there are a handful of really great threads in our subreddits this week. There was one thread that talked about how 96% of the vote to increase the fee to 4%, I think they were referencing the governance poll, is coming from 10 addresses. And so they tried to make the point that, Maker's very centralized. But in the comments, you'll see that that people really harp on the point that, despite the fact that these 10 addresses, held the 96% of the vote, those 10 addresses also have the most skin in the game from mismanagement, from screwing things up, right? They're the ones with the most MKR. So even though Maker, falls into this realm of plutocracy, the game theory actually kind of defends against that. So the criticism to say that the vote is very centralized, it's not so simple, because the people, and it's actually a good thing, because the people with the most to lose and the most to gain are incentivized to do the right decisions, And so right now, the decisions that they're trying to make are basically to restore the peg. And so, yeah, that's a really interesting thread. A lot of great comments in there. There was another thread called "An Attempt at Debunking the Myth That an Increased Stability Fee Decreases Dai Demand and Other Misconceptions." I believe this was a thread by Ryan Sean Adams. I might be wrong, though. No, yeah, I am wrong. It was a thread by a user called Tuned3F, and it actually was a super high quality post. I definitely suggest reading it. Check that out if you are curious about arguments surrounding the stability fee and its efficacy and as a policy tool. So check that out. And lastly, the last thread that I decided to curate and bring up to you guys this week is "Why Erode the Maker Narrative Unnecessarily? An Argument for Using the Debt Ceiling as a Policy Tool." I think this one was Ryan Sean Adams. And so this is where he makes an argument that a lot of people in the community have been making for the use of the debt ceiling as an emergency policy tool in this sort of special scenario that we find ourselves in. Even though the debt ceiling isn't meant to be a policy tool, and even though the debt ceiling actually is supposed to function as a barrier to liquidity risk, and just it's just supposed to be a control on the system rather than a policy tool that you use. He makes the argument that, why not use it until multi-collateral Dai comes out. Then you have a more balanced set of policy tools, which he's referencing the DSR and the stability fee. So right now we only have the stability fee, and he's arguing that that might be precedent enough. That might warrant the use of the debt ceiling in this time. So really interesting comments there. Really cool argument. Check that out. And then a couple more things in governance. There was one more thread, and it's actually Matthew Rabinowitz's weekly narrative on MakerDAO, and he put one out on the 13th of April. He does a really great job providing a synopsis of what's going on in governance and Maker. So check those out. Super great if you're into just a 10-15 minute read, even shorter, just to kind of jog your memory, see what's going on on the governance side of things. And then there was also a discussion thread that who put it up? I think it was Cyrus or Rich. Yeah, Rich put it up. So basically, it was discussing and asking for feedback about this problem that we have in governance polling. So how do we poll if the most recent executive vote doesn't result in a state change? And we've had a lot of sort of, I don't want to call it luck, but we've had a lot of sort of unity in the changes that have been made in the system thus far. Votes pass. Everything's kind of been moving with a pretty steady cadence. But this week we saw that the executive vote took until Sunday midday to the evening to actually pass, while the governance poll was scheduled for Monday. So what would have happened if the executive vote didn't pass? And so that's kind of the problem with having a preset cadence for governance polling. Like there's certain things that might stop it, like a failed executive vote, or like an executive vote that just takes like a week to pass or something like that. And so if you're interested in that discussion, definitely check out the discussion thread and participate. So yeah, that's about it for this week's highlights and stuff that's been going on. I want to open it up to you guys if you guys have any other questions, and then if not, I have a couple of other things I want to bring to your attention after. All right, silence. Not the worst indicator. Okay, cool. So I've noticed that these community meetings have become more or less like a sort of like weekly, not newsletter, but basically just what's going on in MakerDAO for the week. And it's become less of a discussion and more of like a bulletin board. And I want these meetings to, well, I don't necessarily want anything. I actually just want feedback from you guys, the people who actually attend these meetings, what you'd like to see out of these meetings, because I'm always into switching things up and seeing what works best. So if you guys have any suggestions on things you'd like to see more of in these meetings, definitely, bring them up. Now's your chance. You could also direct message me. But yeah, looking for ideas. And Akiva says in the chat he has a question. Yeah, sure, Akiva, what's up?
So this isn't so related to the meta issue of the calls, but it's more related to the issue of the peg. But
okay,
I'm wondering if companies like do companies like Fluidity, Factora get concerned about the weakness of the peg, and does it sort of deter them from wanting to use Dai because like they need to have more stability if they want to do real estate deals with Dai?
Right, of course, especially like converting their Dai to US dollars, or yeah, absolutely. I can imagine that not only them, but like many business development partners or like many people who use Dai are concerned about, Dai stability and the peg, which I think is the reason why it's been so urgent that governance is trying to fix it by raising rates so aggressively. But if anybody's in the call that's interested in actually speaking to that, I don't know if anybody is. But generally speaking, I don't see, like, intuitively, yeah, I imagine that they are.
So is Maker going to lose partnerships because of this? Like, are companies like Fluidity Factora going to try another stablecoin because of this?
I don't know, because, well, I can imagine that on the whole, right? Like, generally speaking, if there is a better product for a company, that they will use it. But I think that Dai kind of holds a special place because of its, decentralization in nature, and like a lot of things it has that seems to be better than other stablecoins. But I don't see why, business development partners or people that are using Dai wouldn't switch over if Dai really was unreliable for long enough. But at the same time, it's really hard to say. I think I'm just making a really big generalization, and obviously generalizations are generalizations. So it really depends on the partner, I guess. Bob says in chat that it only makes business sense to not depend on a single entity, hence other stable coins are likely to be used. Yeah, exactly. Also in the idea of diversification and not risking everything on sort of one stable coin. I can definitely imagine business partners using other stable coins. Yeah. And I think that's just, reality. And that applies really to almost any product in any market, which is why governance is so important, and the peg is really important. But anyway, yeah. All right.
So I'm wondering if that means that maybe we should be even more. This is maybe a question for the Thursday call, but
Yeah,
it
sure.
relates to business development. That's why I'm asking it here now. But I'm wondering if that's a sign that maybe we should be even more aggressive because we want to really make sure we don't lose the partnerships.
Possibly. I think that the most pressure is probably felt by the market makers, like, and I'm talking purely out of like my own, like how I see the different players in this ecosystem. I think the market makers are probably feeling the biggest squeeze from the consistent like trading below of the dollar. But yeah, I mean, absolutely, that is an argument to be made, and I think it should definitely be brought up if you're there on Thursday. Yeah. Iron Rand had a question. Is the team surprised that the peg has slipped, or did they expect the exchange rate to stick at $1 come what may? I think most people, not just the team, because the team in general, I'd say is pretty much on the same wavelength as the community when it comes to like the peg, right? We expected the peg to behave the same way it was behaving like last year, where it was trading above and under $1 with pretty regular, cadence, in a pretty regular like band. But it was really interesting because people didn't expect that, rises in prices and the bull run would have the effect that it does, and all the sort of confounding variables, because, who would have guessed, leverage is cheap and people want to leverage, and, even a 20% a year rate might be cheap for them because they're expecting 100% in a month or 100% in 3 months. So it's really, really interesting trying to juggle the sort of model in your head of like human psychology and the way that people's decisions are made. And so, yeah, I think that the team was surprised that the peg has slipped so consistently. But ultimately, the team is the team, and maker governance is maker governance, and we got to work together in what way we can to govern this thing right. Yeah. Yeah, man, of course. All right, cool. So if anybody has any other, questions, things that they want to bring up, feel free to do so. This one is going to be, well, this meeting is going to be a little short this week. We don't have a guest, and so, yeah, feel free to bring anything up. Otherwise, I'm happy to end the call in a few minutes. All right, cool. Well, thank you guys for coming. It's always my pleasure to give you guys updates on what's going on in the Maker universe. And again, if anybody has any ideas or things that they'd want to see in the call to try to incorporate maybe the themes, or trying to get more guests on. I think that's a big goal of mine. I think I'm gonna go for getting regular guests here every week. But regardless, yeah, if anybody has any suggestions, feel free to direct message me or anything you'd like. Yeah, that's a great point, Bob. I think a co-host, having maybe 2 people, that's a great idea. I like that. Actually gonna jot that down. All right, cool. Well, thank you guys for joining.
Bye. Thank you.